Very good morning, brothers and sisters. So glad to see all of you this morning, and so glad to see some of visitors all the way from Philippines, and some of the visiting brothers from the Klang Valley, making time to be with us this morning. I tell you, God will definitely bless you as you make time for Him this morning. You know, in our life, we have quite a number of significant things. One of them is work. The other one is play. And the third one is worship. But we do not treat them with the due respect. What I call, sometimes we have this misplaced focus. We do not work our work, we do not play our play, and we do not worship at our worship. We tend to worship our work, and we work our play, and we play our worship. Have you ever heard of the term workaholics? Yeah, workaholics. They worship their work. Have you heard of golfer's widow? I mean, those of you who play golf. The husband early morning will go to the golf course and play golf. Right at sunset, only returns home. The poor wife becomes a golfer's widow. And of course, the children also miss their fathers, right? Because they work their play. But sometimes we also play our worship. Just play, right? You know, worship is a very important aspect of our life. In fact, the most important duty of man is to fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. I did not say that. It was King Solomon who, after all his experimentations in life, with all his wealth and all his wisdom, with all his empire building and other experiments, he came to this conclusion: fear God. And he said, this is the conclusion of the whole matter: fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. Yes, worship is a serious matter, and I think we should not neglect it. We should not lay down worship. And this morning, I would like to go together with you and explore the meaning of worship. Hopefully that we can have a better understanding, and hopefully that we can improve our worship. We are talking about Christian worship, of course. By the term Christian worship, we mean worship as authorized by God in the New Testament, binding upon all Christians. Who is to be worshipped? Humans are worshipping beings. We like to worship. But the Bible specifically mentioned that we are not to worship Satan. We are not to worship angels. We are not to worship man, dead or living. We are not to worship nature, however majesty is the mountain, or the sea, or the animals. We are not to worship nature, right? But we are to worship God, and God only, and God alone. Because in Psalms 22:27 it says, all the ends of the world shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before you. Yes, worship. Worship is not an option. It is a command. It's a commandment of God, right through the ages of mankind. Mankind can be divided into three ages: the patriarchal age, the Mosaical age, and the Christian age. In the patriarchal age, in Genesis 22, verse 5, it says, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. From here we also know that some people say all life is worship. Not so. Because otherwise Abraham and his children, his sons, would not have go to a specific place at a specific time for worship. Yes. Mosaic age in Psalms 95 verse 6 also tells us that, oh come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. And in our Christian age in John 4:23, but the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. Yes, God has commanded us to worship Him. But God has not left it to man's devices. You see, the word worship occurs in the English translation of the Bible nearly 200 times. However, God has never, in any dispensation of the religious history that we read, simply commanded man to worship. Yes, God has commanded that He is to be worshipped. And God has also commanded how He is to be worshipped. God has always been specific, explicit, and definite regarding how He wants to be worshipped. In other words, how to worship God has never been left to man's discretion. It's not man's whims and fancies. How do we know then what is authorized by God in the matter of worship? Very simple, just by referring to His Word, the Bible. The Bible. In Genesis 4:3-5, we have the very early record of the history of the early family. We have here an account of two men, Cain and Abel, worshipping God. And here in Genesis 4:3-5 it reads, in verse 3, and in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. And in verse 4, Abel also brought the first fruit of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering. You see, Cain must be one of those who are guided by sanctified common sense. Evidently, he was thinking, well, it made no material difference what was offered to God, so long as there's something to offer to God. But he was wrong. In verse 5, but he, God, did not respect Cain and his offering. What went wrong for Cain? What went right for Abel? Was God showing favoritism? Was God showing favoritism to Abel and not to Cain? Let's investigate. Look at God's attributes in Acts 10:34. In truth, I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation whoever fears Him and works righteousness is acceptable by Him. Again, in Galatians 2:6, God shows personal favoritism to no man. Yes, one thing that we know of God, our God is a fair God. Our God is a just God. He does not show partiality. He does not show favoritism. Whoever worships God and obey His will, God will hear. And so, here we have, we read further in Hebrews 11:4, that by faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead, still speaks. Abel was dead many, many years ago, thousands of years ago. He being dead, yet speaketh. That was wonderful. What a legacy Abel has left for mankind. What will be your legacy when you are dead and gone? Will you be mentioned? He being dead, yet speaketh. That was Abel. Why was it so? What does it mean? When we say by faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. By deductive reasoning, we learn that God has commanded a certain kind of offering. And then we turn to Romans 10:17, and then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Yes, by deductive reasoning, we know that Abel listened to God, and Cain did not listen to God. And that's why God favors Abel and his offerings, and not Cain. Yes, faith is very important. And then in John 4:23 it says, but the hour is coming, and now is, when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. What are true worshippers? True worshippers are those who worship according to God's will. So what does this imply? Okay? The fact that there are things like true worshippers imply that there are also false worshippers. There are also unacceptable worship. Am I right? If there is something true, there must be something false. If there are true worshipping, there must be some false worshipping. Right? So this teaches us very clearly that it is not simply enough to just worship, to just have a mental conscious that we are worshipping God. It is possible to worship God and yet not worshipping God acceptably. This is what John 4:23 implies. Right. Since God seeks only true worshippers, it follows that He is not pleased with those who render any other form of worship. Because there are also two other types of worship. Those are not acceptable. In Matthew 15:19, Matthew chapter 15 verse 9, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. This is vain worship. Vain means come to nothing, zero, to no purpose, no result. Right? It's vain worship. Right? Teaching as doctrines of commandments of men. And then in Acts 17 verse 23, for as I passed by, Paul said when he was in Athens, and behold your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you. You see, these people in Athens, they were very religious. They were very devotional. In fact, they have an idol, a statue for all kinds of gods. And just in case, okay, they miss out on God, they will have an altar and you place them to the unknown God. Bow everything to the unknown God. Right? But this is ignorant worship. Okay? And so both types are to be avoided if you are to please God. Vain worship, ignorant worship are to be avoided if you are to please God. In John 4:23, okay, we have this record. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. Question: what kind of worshipper does God seek? For the Father seeketh such to worship Him. You see, God is the object of our worship. God is the one that we seek to please. He is the primary reason why we come together to worship God. And so, it is He who decides how He should be worshipped, not you and I. In the matters of worshiping God, it's God who decides how He should be pleased, how He should be worshipped. Not me, not you. Right? And how He is to be worshipped. John 4:23 tells us that, for the Father seeketh such to worship Him. What kind of worshippers does God seek? God is a spirit, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. What do we mean by worshiping God in spirit? To worship God in spirit means to engage in worship which is sincere, which is heartfelt. We must avoid all forms of ritual, all forms of ceremony, ritualistic performance. Right? It's not reading a written prayer. It's not reading something from a catechism, but it must be from the heart with all sincerity. That is meant by in spirit. And what do we mean by worshiping God in truth? To worship God in truth means to worship in harmony with the New Testament teaching. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. Thy word is truth. John 17:17. So whatever that we do or do not do must be in harmony with the scriptures, in particular the New Testament, as we are living in the New Testament era. One more thing. God is a spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. Must. M-U-S-T. That means there is no other way. That means there is no bargaining. It is a must. Right? God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. And it requires two things. Right? Just like we often mention about, he that eateth and digesteth shall live. In support of our argument, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. Okay? There's no point eating and you get not digest. You don't live. Right? But if you don't put food in, there's nothing to digest. You also don't live. He that eateth and digesteth shall live. In the same way, Mark 16, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. So you have to believe. But believing is not enough. You have to be baptized in Jesus Christ in order to be saved. In the areas of worshipping God too, worshipping God must be in spirit and in truth. So if you just have the spirit, okay, with all sincerity, but you don't have the truth as in harmony with the New Testament, then you are just following the commandments of men. And that is what vain worship. Of no effect, zero effect. It doesn't please God. It's not acceptable to God, because you may be all sincere, or with all good intentions, but you're not following the view of God. Vain worship. But if you have the truth, but when you come in, okay, your mind is not in the worship. Your mind is elsewhere. In this era, we have what we call multitasking. Okay? At the same time, we can do many things. Our body can be in a worship service, but our mind can be somewhere. Multitasking, they call it. Right? Well, I can only say, this is not what God seeketh. Remember what He says? For the Father seeketh such to worship Him. Who? The true worshippers. How? In spirit and in truth. And so, if your body is here and your mind is somewhere else, I can only say, this is not what God seeketh. And if you ask me for a further illustration, I would say it's like sitting on a rocking chair. Always in motion, but not going anywhere.